Yeah, I get it, man. I need to add a couple more pillars. How would they begin to identify those pillars and then maybe add those?
My advice is always don't trade one pillar for another. Don't neglect your current database just because rates are high and you're focusing on social media. I do think there's a little bit, probably a lot for some people, too much focus on social media. I think it's important. I think it should be there. Got to invest time, but don't go all in on social media, not right away. It's adding pillars, not neglecting the others.
My special guest is a multi-year President's Club producer, branch manager, area manager, regional SVP, Platinum Club. Like, the guy's got all the accolades. Brian Weis, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. This is a long time coming, frankly. I've seen your name around for so many years. I've bought your book, and I finally get to meet you face to face and actually talk to you. So this is an honor.
So I want to jump into this chapter, if you don't mind. Let's get right into it. Rethink Everything, the chapter 19 from the book. Reignite Your Career with Ideas in Action is the title of your book, or the chapter. And your focus is on, if I'm correct, well, let me ask you this way. What were you hoping to accomplish with your chapter, your contribution to the book?
You know, ultimately, and this is going to sound a little strange, but ultimately what I wanted to accomplish is to give people hope. I mean, it has been, and think about last December, November, when you and I were asked to participate in this group. I mean, the book, that was in the thick of it, right? People were really struggling, couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I just wanted to give people some hope. And I wanted to give them some ideas about things they can do to adapt, change, and to bring in some business. You and I have been around the business long enough. We know there's 1,000 different ways to get business. And I believe, especially earlier in my career as a loan officer, you could survive on two good pillars. And that was your past customer database and your sphere. And that was a nice list of real estate agents that would refer you business on a regular basis. I think in today's world, two pillars are not enough. I think we've got to be a little bit more creative. Another pillar is social media. Another pillar might be financial advisors. Another pillar might be builders. A pillar might be, Zillow leads or lead acquisition. We've got to be a little bit more creative and put more lines in the water to get business than what we needed to do even just a few years ago, right?
Okay, love that. Let's break it down a little bit further. What's changed? Why is that now, you believe, important today? What's happening? What's happened? What's coming?
Yeah, so it comes down to the business dropping off. So many people entered the business when rates were low. It was refinance mania, and a lot of those individuals hung on for a very long time. Made it hard for those of us that have been in the industry for 20 or 30 years because there was just more competition. So that, combined with margin compression, certain loan officers might be making less per deal. Companies are certainly making less per transaction. So we might not have the resources that we used to have. And I believe, a lot of especially the bigger companies had some pretty robust coaching programs and support from a business development standpoint. And a lot of those resources I was hearing were going away too. So that's why, it's great to have individuals like yourself and some of the other coaching companies out there as resources. But their internal resources were cut back or eliminated altogether because of the compression that was happening. So I feel it was, it's our duty to fill that void and help wherever we can, whether it's ideas or business development planning or mindset or whatever it may be. It was our job to help.
This might not be a fair question, and I'm just so I'm thinking through the frame of what you just said and what I know, or at least I have some access to feedback from, because I talk to a pretty decent amount of LOs around the country, is I think, first of all, I mean, on its surface, I agree with what you're saying, right? Is we need to add more. As a matter of fact, that was the kind of what I talked about this morning on the podcast, which you and I were talking about before we hit record, which was adding these additional pillars. But I guess what I see when I hear that, or my response to that, is a few things I see occur. One, they do a lousy job of it. They dabble and they don't really create any momentum, or they forget that the foundational element or sources of their business at the risk or the sacrifice of that golden goose to be like, I'm going all in on social media, man, screw agents, right? Like, so how do you address, for those that are listening, like, what would you advise them if they're hearing you, they're like, yeah, I get it, man, I need to add a couple more pillars. Like, how would they begin to identify those pillars and then maybe add those?
Yep. So first of all, my advice is always don't trade one pillar for another, right? Don't neglect your current database just because rates are high and you're focusing on social media. I do think there's a little bit, probably a lot for some people, too much focus on social media. I think it's important. I think it should be there. Got to invest time, but don't go all in on social media, not right away, for most of us. So there's that. It's adding pillars, not neglecting the others. And that might mean working a little bit longer. That might be working a little bit smarter, a little bit harder. The other thing is that's where the coach comes in. I think, now more than ever, people do need a coach and a mentor. And if you're not getting that, my advice always is, if you're not getting that at your company, or if your company's coaching resources have diminished, you've got to seek help outside of your company, right? So it's realizing you need more pillars. It's getting with the right coach to help you develop those pillars. And simultaneously, and you and I touched on this right before we press record too, but I started a coaching company back in December too, a free coaching group based on Facebook. It's called the Action Plan Community. It started out as the Loan Officer Action Plan, but it became the Action Plan Community because even though it was for loan officers, we had real estate agents joining our calls and our group all the time. So I wanted to broaden the scope. It's rebranded recently as Action Plan Community. Anybody can find it on Facebook and join the group. But so there's that community inside Facebook, and then we do calls on a regular basis with subject matter experts. Jeff, I hope to have you. It's my goal, my dream to have you as a contributor in the group at some point here. You didn't know that yet, so you don't have to answer off the cuff. But I created that resource to get that creativity and get those ideas flowing. And then it's up to the individual loan officer then to execute. And if they need help with execution, that's where they reach out to a coach, maybe even Jeff, right?
Sure. So we can link that up in the show notes then, right?
Yep. Okay, absolutely.
Cool. So anybody's listening, there'll be a link to that also in the show notes. Okay. So I'm back to your book here in the wonderful green book. And, once again, shout out Kyle Bryan, if you're listening. Hey man, we love you. Green book, right? Nice and prominent in the video. As a matter of fact, I got to get a real clip. Let's just point at the book and go, yeah, man, the book is awesome.
They've developed quite a community too. I mean, sorry to interrupt your chain of thought here, but
go ahead.
The contributors, and I've met almost all of them at this point, great people with great hearts, passion for the industry, and some really amazing ideas. So if you are a loan officer looking for ideas, that green book is your Bible. That's it. That's the best. For sure. What is it? $15, $16 you could ever spend.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's from what I hear, that's a beer at Michigan State these days. So
it is. And to clarify, it's University of Michigan, not Michigan State.
Oh,
so
sorry,
if my daughter ever watches this, I've got to clarify that.
The podcast is over now. Brian's out of here.
Katie. Sorry, Katie.
Oh boy, there's a guy who doesn't really know his colleges. That's me. All right. So let's go through some of the pillars you have in here, and maybe the reason why I want to do this is to help those listening. How would they identify what would be a natural next pillar? Let's just assume that whoever's listening has real estate agents somewhere because it's tradition. And I'm happy to get into a riff on why agents or why not. And a lot of people like to bag on agents, but that's up to you. But the other pillars here are, I may not read them all because you have quite a few, but financial planners, renovation, what else we got? You mentioned social media, video, consumer direct marketing strategies, educational webinars. Where would somebody start? What, you know what I mean? What would be, is there any, does it depend on where they're at, or what would you say?
I would say follow your passion. And as cliche as that sounds, I would, take a pen and a paper, Go in a quiet room on a Saturday morning when you're not going to be interrupted, and just sort of think through these things and the types of people that might be involved in those pillars and what you'd most enjoy. And I would dip my toe in the water, maybe talk to a coach, talk to some colleagues, talk to people that are already in that space. If you've developed a passion for, or you think you'd be very interested in renovation lending, I think it's an amazing pillar. It could be a pillar all in itself, just focusing on renovation lending. I mean, there's coaches in the industry, MrRenovation.com. There are coaches in the industry that talk about just renovation lending.
Right.
Vince at MrRenovation.com, amazing human being. He was a contributor on my calls just a few months ago on the coaching group, and for a week laid out how to develop a business development plan for renovation lending. All of those calls are recorded. You could go into the Facebook group now, scroll back, see the calls with Vince, and get a little taste of what it's like to work renovation lending. And you might listen to those calls and or talk to Vince and find out, you know what, that's not really my thing. Okay, then take a look at a different pillar. Maybe it's VA lending. Maybe it's reverse mortgage. I mean, there's so many ideas out there. And I guess, you and I have been around in the business so long, Jeff, that maybe we take those ideas for granted. And that was kind of the idea of my chapter, is to spur some creative thinking and get some ideas cooking for some people. It was also the idea behind my coaching group. Then you can choose from there, choose from the list, I guess.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's funny, and I love this, that it's expanding the pool of opportunities or thought for some people listening, I hope, because usually what most people do is they deal with the realtor thing, and then they're like, oh, I'll try some financial advisors, and then they go down the list. They're like, oh, let me pay for some leads, but you've actually opened it up, and I think there's an important point here. As you well know, there's a difference between being transactional versus relational, right? Yes. And I am going to say publicly right now, and I'd love to riff on this if you think it's somewhat different, that when you're buying leads and you're dealing with an internet lead that's been purchased, that's hard to develop a relationship. Am I wrong, or
you're absolutely right? So when I was a retail loan officer, I purchased leads. They had a retail, I think they called it the retail purchase lead program. And I can't remember, I think I paid $2,500 per month, and you had a certain allotment guaranteed of a number of leads that would be sent to you. I tried it for 3 months. I failed miserably. Didn't close one loan. But it's because my mindset, the biggest waste of money ever. But my mindset was retail, and especially at that time, if you got a referral from a real estate agent, as long as you called them within a few hours, or in many cases same day, you were fine. Lead, you got to, even then, you got to hit that in a couple of minutes, or they already had 12 other calls and they're already angry because people are calling them. So it was a different mindset. I was taught that, but I didn't act on it. I didn't understand it. So I nixed it.
And you think about I've been this, by the way, we didn't talk about this, but my first start was I worked for a subprime lender taking internet leads over the phone, So I totally get what you're saying. And that's why I got out of that and went to Countrywide, our mutual company that we both were at. And because I realized that I wanted to build a career, which circle back to these other pillars that you talked about. I mean, that's why I wanted to highlight and again, I'm not here to pass judgment. Like, everything works. You said at the beginning, right? Everything. I have this saying that when it comes to marketing, everything works. It just doesn't work equally well for everybody all the time, everywhere. Right. So you got to figure out to your point, what works for you. Now, what I love about the examples you wrote down of additional pillars is these are largely relationship driven. Because if I'm going to put time, money, and effort in something, I want to be able to have a competitive advantage that's built on my skill set, my ability to market, my ability to connect and build relationships with people. And I just think, as I said, that's a lot harder to do with buying leads. There are companies that do that because they are a huge operation, right? Like Quicken Loans or somebody. Right. So that's a whole separate animal, though. There's nobody listening that's going to become a Quicken Loans, I don't think. But could you build a platform? Could you follow some advice and coaching that helps you attract and engage financial advisors, reverse mortgage, reno loans, all those things? I think so. Why haven't more people done
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. That's a great question. I have a feeling though, and I don't know for sure because it was never a pillar business of mine. I'm trying to think if I ever had a loan officer on my team that it was a pillar of theirs. But for sure, you could find a coach in the industry that would help narrow in that particular pillar. I was just tossing it out there as an idea because I know there are people that do it. I'm trying to think of anybody that's actually doing
Well, I know on the reverse side there is
that
Christina
high
Harms.
level. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, Christina, she's been on the podcast. I have a client of mine, Liz Reese. What's up? Shout out. She also is diversified in reverse and does really well with it. And of course, I always come back to if I was going to originate again. I love that you brought this up because I hadn't thought about these pillars in a while. But one of the other pillars I used to think about would be the divorce niche, because that's one that's recession proof. You don't get shopped on rates. They value expertise. It's not super crowded. It's relationship based. It's referral driven. So that'd be one I would consider too.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely, it's a great idea. And again, I know there are coaches that zero in on that and teach how to build a business development plan around that. So I personally don't.
Well,
I don't know if you do, but there are people out there that do that.
I mean, there's certified divorce lending, that's CDLP. There's divorcethishouse.com. These people have been on the show. And these are pretty, I've gone through Divorce This House training. They've been on at least 2 times on the podcast. I've interviewed loan officers that are doing divorce. And again, talk about sources of business, which is why a lot of people tend to go with the financial advisor. They're like, what's the next place that's got sources? Oh, financial advisors. And then we get into this discussion about, what's wrong with agents, what's wrong, like why agents suck, all this stuff. And it's like, look, man, every lead source has its issues and challenges. It's easy to throw agents under the bus because there's so many of them and we have a long history, but there's challenges with working with every niche. Like my buddy Tim Davies used to say, everything's hard, choose your hard, right?
Yep. That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's a key point because none of it's easy, but that's why I think you have to choose and focus in and not add too many pillars, but it does take more than 2. So.
Well, and see, that's another good point. Let's circle back and kind of double tap on that for a second. We mentioned this a few moments ago, which is be careful. Like I'm sure you've seen people try and scatter themselves too thin. They spread themselves too thin and try and do 17 initiatives at once. How do you coach around that?
Yeah, so more often it's the opposite problem that people aren't investing enough time and enough pillars. But you're right, there is that other extreme when people try to do too much. So they've got 7 pillars and there's really only so many hours in the day. And what happens is if you dilute your time too much, you're not being effective in any one given area. And I'd love to say the magic number now is 4 pillars. But the reality is it depends on which pillars you choose. Right. So I think Sphere and CR, your database is always a number 1 pillar. Real estate agents, if you're going to really focus well on financial advisors, and if you're going to add a reverse mortgage component to that, like you just brought up, that's a big time commitment too. That might mean, those 4 pillars are enough, or those 3 pillars, sorry. So I think it just depends on your approach and how much time you're going to need to invest in that given pillar. If you are going to do lead acquisition, that can be a time commitment in and of itself because you're not investing time getting the leads, you're just writing a check, but it's the follow-up, it's the chase, it's the long cycle of rapport building, it's building the marketing and follow-up plans. It can be a big pillar too. So that's why, and I know I'm kind of vomiting a bunch of ideas and stuff here, but that's why it's important to have a coach and have somebody that's going to help you hone these things in and really focus on it and be held accountable. Yeah,
absolutely. Having a fresh set of eyes who can see things you can't see because you're too close to it, it always helps.
Yes, absolutely.
What were your, I don't know if we covered this, but what were your primary pillars when you were originating?
So it was 2. It was real estate agents and it was my sphere of influence, my database, past customers, friends and family. That was it. It was two. A little bit of builder business on and off. In the condo boom in the late 90s in Chicago, I had a number of condo development groups or condo developments in the city of Chicago where I'd call on high rises and condo conversions. But that was really only for a few years. Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. I learned a ton. Yeah.
What was the primary source of your business when you were originating?
It was real estate agents was the primary.
What did that look like? Like
100%.
how many core agents did you have like sending you?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. I would say 35 to 40 good agents at any one time. There's a lot of ways to approach real estate agents, right? So within that pillar, there's sort of micro ways to approach it. Some people will only call on top performers, right? They'll only call on the best of the best, and therefore you would only need 4 or 5. My approach was not to work with the newbies either. I mean, I did. I had a number of those in my sphere, but I didn't spend a lot of time with them. I would do group training with the newbies and things like that. But I would go for the middle of the road agent. And my theory was, and I think I was right in most cases, but the theory was that they're not getting called as much as the top producers and maybe didn't require as much, financial support, right? They weren't asking for the big marketing budgets. They weren't asking for covering big, expensive events. They were a little bit more realistic on what the marketing budget should be. So that's why. It doesn't mean that's right, but that was my thinking at the time. And therefore, I had a pretty large group of agents. The other thing, my approach was always just to do open houses. I would sponsor brokers opens. I would go to open houses on Saturdays and Sundays. And that's how I met people. And then from there, I would build this big pool, this big list of real estate agents, and I would drip on them with email, phone calls, and then I would do monthly events, usually happy hours, occasionally a lunch and learn to educational event. But I did mass marketing through open houses, face-to-face, then events to build relationships. Yep. That's what I did a lot.
So open houses was your superpower.
It was.
Interesting. I don't hear that very often. Yeah. They're a drudgery for many. Did you enjoy it?
At first I hated it. And I'll be honest, the first time I did this, I remember I drove into the city and went to one of the nicer neighborhoods and sat in my car. I had my list of addresses that I was going to go see, sat in my car for 20 minutes before I walked into the first one. Stressful, right? You don't know how you're going to be treated. Are you going to have the door slammed on you? Are they going to shout at you? But it took me a minute to work up the courage. But once I did it, I developed a routine and then I kind of enjoyed it. Like I found it a way to meet new people. I made it a game in my head. My goal was to not go home until I had 10 business cards in my pocket, because I knew if I got 10, there would be 1 or 2 that I just knew I wasn't going to call because it wasn't an immediate match. But so, if I did that twice in a weekend, I'd have 15, 16 cards, 18 cards of people to follow up with on Monday. I would add all of those cards to my database, add them to my email drip campaign, and I would call them throughout the week.
Wow.
And then invite them to my events.
Like that could work.
I mean, it was old school.
Wait a minute. Brian, can that work today, actually?
I honestly think it would. I really think it would. Open houses are coming. Yeah, it would. It's the phrase that I keep going back to, and I can't remember where I heard this at first. I didn't write it. I heard it somewhere, but if you want to do more business, meet more people. And honestly, what better way to meet agents face to face to show up at their open house? It's a captive audience. Most of them are very, very nice. It was very rare that I got a negative reaction from you working on a Saturday just like they're working. If nothing else, they're impressed that you're out there hustling just like they are.
Right. And did you wind up like hosting them together, like pre-calling people in the house with your laptop and stuff?
Rarely on a weekend. I probably should have done more of that. But my goal doing the weekend things was, and different approaches, but my goal was to just get as many cards as I could on one day, right? If you're sitting there, you're only connecting with one agent. meet and greet, only enough time to build rapport, grab a card, and then I was off to the next one so that I could get a number of cards. What I would do is I'd host a broker's open during the week. At the time, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was every Tuesday that had broker opens in the city of Chicago. And I would host, I'd bring sandwiches, flyers, my laptop, I'd do the whole thing. And then agents would come to me, and still the goal was to get as many cards as possible.
Great way to meet a lot of agents. You're positioned with that agent at the open house. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's old, quote unquote, old school, but this is a connection business, right? And the more, like you said, the more people you meet, the more business you do. It's a law of large numbers.
It absolutely is. 100% it is.
The other thing about that too is, do you think like back then was it quiet out there? Like there's not a lot of LOs doing open houses.
There was not. And I'm kind of curious now. I'm going to do a poll and find out how many loan officers are actually doing open houses today. I would guess very, very few. But back then, no, I don't think I ever, and I did this for years, I don't think I ever ran into another loan officer at an open house.
I also want to just pause and make a just double tap on this point you made for a second, though, that you sat in your car out in front of that open house for 20 minutes and kind of worked up the courage. I can 100% relate to that. And I can remember more than one occasion where I was afraid to walk in, nervous, scared, like all the stuff you described. And then you realize that most of that is just head talk, and they're nice and they're like, oh, how you do? Like they're happy to see you. And, I used to go in with finance flyers that I would design for the house in advance, like look up the listing for that day, you know what I mean? And just walk in like, boom, I got your flyers ready to go for your listing. Oh, thank you so much. Now, some might toss them, but like, I don't care. Like you said, the whole strategy is you physically got in front of 10 or 20 agents. And tell me about that then. What on Mondays or Tuesdays when you followed up, how did it look conversion wise to lead them to the next step?
It was about a third that I could get them to, meet 3%. Or have about a meet or have a meaningful conversation on the phone. I would call that a win. Not everybody would take time for coffee, but to me, if I had a 40-minute conversation about our kids and sports or life, like to me, that's rapport building, and that's the idea of a coffee meeting. So I knew that if I could have a meaningful conversation, I could get them to one of my events eventually, and I was doing them every month. So I knew I could get face-to-face with them if I had that rapport building conversation day one or day two, right?
It's so funny you say that. Events, I know with networking, lunch and learns, classes, workshops, all that. And when you just described there is, we were talking about Alex Hormozy before we hit record. And I think this is another area LOs miss is few have an actual system. Like you think about a funnel, right? The picture of a funnel, and funnels are so popular today, right? Click funnels, et cetera. Everybody knows what they are. But how many of you don't have a funnel? Let's just take agents because that's what we're running on here. Like you actually had a process. That's what a funnel is. It's a process. You would go out, meet, get 10 cards, you'd follow up, you'd invite them to their events. It's just like, that's what a business does, is it markets to those people through different channels and means consistently over time.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. Maybe why aren't I more successful with agents? Maybe because you're not following a system like Brian just outlaid, which is like, oh, you actually have to follow up. You have to have what's next when they don't take the call or they don't meet with you. You're always dripping. I'm sure you have stories of agents who you stayed in touch with for 3, 6, 12 months. And eventually, right, some people, they start turning after that period of time.
Yes. Sometimes it's a long game. Sometimes it's a short game, but either way, you got to play the game, right? Which is get in front of people, drip, and have a system. That's well said.
Now you said when I asked you how many agents your core agents, you said like 30, 35. I have to tell you, when you said that number, that was shocking to me because when I ask most loan officers, like they actually fill out a form before a call with me and I ask them how many agents, et cetera. I mean, the average number is 10 or less.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
Today, 10 or less.
Yeah. And I was going to say that's kind of dangerous because unless those 10 are top producers, you're not going to get a lot of business from 10.
Well, you've seen the stats.
It depends on the agent, but yeah, true.
Right.
True.
that, like, what is the stat lately? It's like 90% of agents closed 4 deals last year or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just love that. It doesn't tell the whole story, right? There's a flip side to that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the takeaway is you need more agents on your bus in this market, considering NAR, people heading out, right? All the turnover, all that stuff.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, yeah,
Interesting.
interesting times. And I do think, I mean, you bring up a great point. I think this would work. I believe this would work today. There's
It does.
relationships. The technology of a face-to-face conversation and a handshake never changes, right?
Right.
How we
Right.
follow up with them changes, or how we market to them changes.
Right.
The videos we send, video marketing wasn't a thing back then. Nah, I just sounded really old when I said that, didn't I?
No,
But
because I'm
the
in there.
marketing,
I'm probably older than you, but keep going.
the marketing changes. The handshake is that doesn't change. The technology doesn't change in a handshake.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things, I don't know if you've heard this said before, but I love this quote. It was from an interview that somebody was doing with Jeff Bezos, and they were asking him, how do you stay on top of like what's changing? Like, how do you look out into the future and be aware of the changes, et cetera, technology? And his response to that is we spend more time focusing on what's not going to change. And we try to get really,
Oh,
really good at that. Thought that was brilliant.
interesting.
So what's not going to
Interesting. They
change?
focus-
Like with Amazon, what's not going to change? People want a good deal and they want it fast, right? That's not going to change.
Yep.
What's not going to change in
Yep.
our business is it's a relationship business that's based on trust, and that's not going to change even with technology. So
Yep.
where's your focus?
So yeah, so Bezos was saying they then focus on the things that aren't going to change, because when you focus on the things that do change, when it changes, you got to change your plan. But if you focus on what doesn't change, your business plan is consistent.
Well, and you could also burn a lot of time, money, and cycles chasing this next big thing, AI or whatever. Not saying it doesn't have its place and its relevance. It does, and it will. But if you just, like we said earlier, divert your focus away from what will always be the same, which is relationships, connection, trust. And all of a sudden you sacrifice that once again, because you think AI is the magic pill or whatever. All of a sudden, your business is hurting.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Amazing points. Yeah. You got me fired up. I'm going to go back into origination. Let's go.
Same here, man. Let's pick a niche. You go one niche, I'll go another. We'll compare notes.
We'll test all this stuff out.
I do like the Reno niche though, because I think considering, right, where a lot of people are sitting at sub 4% interest rates, like there's not going to be as much turnover anymore. I heard this term a while back that we're in a transaction recession. So those are where I live in a 25, 28-year-old house. So I'm probably some point going to be a candidate for Reno,
It just depends when you're ready, right? Yeah, absolutely.
The other cool thing about Reno, now I'm geeking off here, is my Starbucks is kicking in. But I remember working back in the day with title companies. This is an idea for you guys listening, where they can obviously pull data based on how old a house is. And when I was living in Orange County, there were certain pockets of South Orange County that were all, 25-year, 30, 40-year-old homes. And there were tracks, and you could target those homes, right, for reno or sale, because we know they're more likely, right? And then of course you could do other stuff like how long has the owner lived in that house, et cetera. But again, that's called being smart in marketing. If you're going to pursue a niche like reno, I'm just riffing here, but I would think that would make sense.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. I love it. That's a great idea. I'm writing that one down.
All right. So let's close out on this. Yep. Brian, we're in Q4. Yes. You've got a captive audience of loan officers who are stepping into Q4 2025. Looks like it has some positive headwinds for us for interest rates. What are you telling everybody they should focus on for the rest of this year?
So the big thing I tell everybody, I tell different things depending where people are, but the big thing I tell everybody is not to put too much weight into this refi wave. We've been waiting years for this to happen. And guess what? So have the servicers. The servicers are coming at their servicing portfolio with a vengeance. For months, they've been building their internal loan officer teams. And their internal loan officer teams, guess what? They take a reduced commissions because it's internal leads, and they're going to be able to offer a better price. So make sure you have a sharp price, A. B, make sure you're staying in touch with your contacts. C, don't count on this to right all your financial woes if you're looking for that to make a bunch of money in 2025. I mean, focus on it, do it, but don't bank on it. So still focus heavily on the purchase business.
Yeah.
The other thing I say is, the other thing I say is, and this again depends on the individual, but it's developing our pillars of business. It's spending time in education, getting a right coach, holding yourself accountable, and executing at a high level. It's not time to take our foot off the gas, because this magical refi wave is going to save our problems, or save our bacon.
Live and die by the refi, right? All right. Well, that's some good advice. I love that you said that, because there are some people salivating, thinking, oh, I can't wait. And they see the post, oh, the rates came down, like all this, just like, man, you got to control the controllables, and what you can control is your mindset, skill set, and what you do every single day. So way to put a cherry on top of this. Once again, Brian, how do people connect with you for those who want to? Tell us.
Yeah. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. I can be found on LinkedIn. And of course, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. They can do a Google search and find me on any of those platforms. Send me a DM. My consulting and coaching website is brwconsult.com. My coaching group is based on Facebook, and that is Action Plan Community. So if you do a Facebook search, Action Plan Community, ask for an invitation. If you're in mortgage or real estate, I'll bring you in. And then Collab. I mentioned Collab, which is a very unique and fun company. I'm really enjoying this, because what we do is we help people go down this entrepreneurial space of starting their own mortgage company. And this could be a loan officer doing 5-6 deals a month. You don't have to be a mega producer for this to make sense financially. It's structured in a way that it's reasonable to start, reasonable support and ongoing fees, so that you don't have to do the compliance, the legal, build the marketing, and the systems. Collab does all of that for you. We also work with real estate company owners to open their own mortgage company. But that website is collabservice.com, and you can get to any of us at Collab on that website.
All right. We're going to link all that up in the show notes so people can easily
That's
just
a lot of
tap
websites
and go.
and links.
I know, right? I got to hire an assistant just to put that in there. Okay, cool. So listen, everybody, follow the links in the show notes. Follow Brian. Let him know that you liked this episode, what your one big takeaway was. Brian, I'm glad we did this. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you.
All right, listeners, you know what to do. If you like this episode, make sure you leave us a review. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.